Crusader Kings 3 is firmly marching towards a massive end of year with the biggest expansion that was ever created and maybe will ever be created for CK3 and arguably for the entire franchise being well on its way. All Under Heaven will be adding everything in East Asia, so that means new cultures, new faiths, new traditions, new flavor, and of course it also means unique government systems for China, Korea, Japan and Southeast Asia, not to mention the features of great projects and natural disasters. There's a ton coming, and the game's way towards this release, sadly, doesn't look nearly as stable as it ought to. Just last week, the Coronations DLC was released. This minor event pack wasn't meant to turn too many eyes. At the end of the day, none of CK3's event packs have ever done this. While all of them collect rather mediocre ratings, it's not really worth getting up in arms about, because it is just a tiny DLC. This one, however, was different. Not only did this DLC release to an abysmal score on Steam to just 17% positive, but it also triggered an apology by one of the developers. There's a lot going on there. This DLC has doubtlessly many issues and not just on the bug territory. I'm going to let you know everything that you need to know so that you're informed and know what's coming for you either way. Coronations are an important topic, especially for medieval Europe. This type of content addresses one of the core issues of Crusader Kings 3, and that is historical content, making sure that you really live as a medieval ruler. And coronations, well, they were incredibly important. We're looking at something where vassals would swear fealty, where they would pledge their allegiance, where the ruler would pledge to go through with a certain agenda, where an oath would bind them to do right by the realm, and ensuring that everybody was signing on to the social contract between the ruler and the vassals. This was incredibly vital. It implemented, of course, also the supremacy of the church by way of crowning the ruler through the hands of a bishop or maybe even a pope. This is incredibly important in the context of history. So what was actually wrong with the Coronations DLC? I mean, how come so many people, including myself, who doesn't normally cover these type of minor DLCs, were up in arms about it, something previously thought impossible? Well, the reason for this is twofold. We are looking at bugs and design. Bugs-wise, the issue was very clear. We're looking at a DLC that made it so that even if you succeeded, after you get crowned, you swear an oath and you fulfill this oath, you would still trigger the Oathbreaker event as if you had failed. Because, well, it's a bug. Simultaneously, some of the oaths were far too difficult, far too easy, some of the rewards were incredibly overpowered or not worth at all. Yeah, the bugs were abundant, and that is of course significant for a patch, for an update, for a DLC that is as minor as this one was. Now, the other side of the coin of this DLC is of course the actual design of Coronations. It is very gamified. The agendas that you're given are more like challenges. Your oaths that you're swearing to your vassals are hardly related to your realm. I can't picture a king or an emperor saying, I need to host at least 10 hunts, and everybody going, yeah, that is going to be a worthwhile agenda for your rule. Other than that, also, of course, well, I will be pushing the claims of 3 claimants. I don't know. It seems like it is something that works through the mechanics of the game rather than through the narrative, which is, of course, not ideal, given that CK3 is a narrative creation game, a storytelling game. So, as you can see, there were issues on the bug side, but there are also issues on the concept side. Interestingly enough, Paradox actually responded very swiftly, and they responded in a way that I didn't really foresee this way. The obvious thing, of course, was effectively an almost immediate patch to the issue here. The most glaring bugs were fixed, and while there still are bugs, not only in the game in general, but also in the content of the DLC, the worst are gone. You will no longer be called an Oathbreaker, even if you succeeded in your mission. The other thing, and I think this is a lot more surprising, at least to me personally, is that there was actually a developer apology. Riyad, the QA manager, stepped forward and talked about what he did wrong, what he wants to do better, and where things escalated into producing a patch that really left absolutely nobody happy. Riyad mentions right away that he feels so strongly about what happened here that he took initiative and went to his higher-ups and asked them to allow them to make this apology. First of all, I will say, going over this apology, it is a full-on apology. There are no ifs and no buts, no justification, no maybe it's your fault and you should just buy a better computer. There's just an I'm sorry. This shouldn't have happened this way, and the way it came out is bad. there can't be any question about it. He does, of course, explain what he thinks happened and what he thinks needs to be addressed going forward. He explains, as a QA manager, that it is his job to ensure that every single project in the development studio Black, which is the one that develops CK3, gets the care that it needs, and this clearly wasn't the case here. He dives deeper and gives the context that All Under Heaven is currently taking all of the resources of the studio, and led to him misallocating the resources he had. Think about it this way, QA has many tasks, but the most important one is obviously logging bugs, making sure that they can be replicated, that there is a clear cause that causes these bugs, and that can then also be fixed. Keeping track of this, making sure that priorities are set correctly, that is QA, and as the QA manager, he should have been the one allocating the hours correctly. I totally get why he looks at himself and says, this shouldn't have happened this way, I didn't give them enough resources. He also notes that most experienced developers were on All Under Heaven, which, yeah, I mean, with how big that update is, makes a lot of sense. What is interesting is that he also, at least in my reading, essentially apologizes to the smaller team that was responsible for Coronations and to the community. So this isn't just community facing, but he discusses that he kind of left them hanging because they should have had more support and this should never happen again. He rounds off the apology by stating that, well, the studio will be looking over everything here, what went wrong and what needs to be avoided going forward, especially from QA side. These changes, maybe, hopefully, will make it so that the team evaluates projects differently and allocates resources in a way that means that, yeah, you aren't going to be releasing something that is incredibly buggy. So that's the apology. In my opinion, it's a good one. It comes from a person that directly believes that they were in the position to change the fate of this DLC. It didn't need to release this buggy, and he could have assigned more resources and that could have addressed this. I will say, of course, though, that, well, there are a bunch of community concerns around this that are really difficult to dismiss, especially looking towards All Under Heaven. For one, there were people saying, to me this feels like a corporate apology. I mean, how empty can it possibly ring? And Riyad actually addressed this himself as well. He said, while I was writing it, this clip, the South Park clip, was playing in my mind the entire time. How do you connect as a worker, as a person, to the community that you just disappointed? I get it, and I understand if people go, I don't buy a single word of what just went down here. But I'm gonna be honest with you, over years of running a YouTube channel, of interacting with the developers, I personally think that to be a game developer for a game as niche and as intricate as a grand strategy game, I kind of feel like you are kind of doing it for the love of the game. You almost have to be doing it for the love of the game. Many developers came from the community itself. They were fans, they are fans, and they want the game to be good. That is why they joined the team. When that doesn't work out, it feels crushing to them. They have a deeply personal relationship, much more personal than if you are just an office worker, I don't know, in a marketing company or selling, let's say, vacuums. You have a personal connection to what you're creating. It is also a creative outlet for people that love history, that want to write stories and depict stories in mechanics. So I personally buy this apology, but that doesn't change that Paradox as a whole in recent years has a very spotty track record when it comes to releases and apologies. Many people have compared this apology to, for example, 2021's Leviathan. Leviathan was a big EU4 DLC that released, and it wasn't just a bad DLC, the entire patch was a mess, prompting game director at the time, Johan Andersson, to apologize, stating that the team was rushed, that it was his fault, that things weren't ready, and that because of this, things went completely sideways. They did step up afterwards. I do really want to add this. They sat down and really fixed a ton of bugs in EU4. That very same studio is now looking towards the release of EU5, of course, on November 4th, at least I think that is the release date, and they are looking towards having done a piece of work that seemed impossible to master. Let's hope that it works out for them, but clearly there were lessons learned though. However, well, apologies aren't really new. Ck3, as much as I personally think that the more systemic approach in Legends of the Dead that we have never seen in any other update for Ck3 was good, well, a lot of people hated that DLC. They also pledged that they will learn from it, that they will connect content and expectations significantly more than it was for Legends of the Dead. And yet here we are. When we look at Hearts of Iron 4 just very recently, they also had an incident like this one, with Graveyard of Empires, of course, making it so that Yeah, the community was incredibly unhappy, and the devs themselves said, we don't know what happened either. We need to analyze, we need to understand, because this is a train wreck. And then on the publishing side, obviously that isn't the same entity as development studios that create the grand strategy games. We also have a bunch of really spotty game track records. We're looking at City Skylines 2 coming out in a state that will set it up for years to having to be worked on, instead of just being a worthy successor to City Skylines 1. We are looking at Life by You being cancelled, something that was meant to be a Sims competitor. Now finally, towards the end of the year, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 is releasing, but it has been a more than rocky road. I think the community sentiment of saying, I don't know whether I can trust Paradox to figure things out, and whenever they say we are going to figure things out, where will that actually lead? I think that sentiment is completely reasonable. Even Victoria 3 currently being praised for the DLCs that they are releasing, for the way that they are writing the ship. I mean, let's be honest with you, I am a fan of the game. I've liked it, but I also called it an unpolished gem. I said that the way this game is releasing will always prompt me when somebody's asking me should I play that game to add caveats, to go, yeah, but you're going to be really annoyed by warfare. Yeah, but this right here isn't working right. Clearly, meaning that these type of issues, even between different studios that aren't really in the same hierarchy, they're persistent. Paradox Interactive themselves and their reputation have become more troublesome. Well, this isn't a Leviathan, because this is just a small event pack. Trust, I think, is very low. And looking now towards All Under Heaven and this apology, can they right that ship? That is something the community is asking. So I totally get, if you're sitting here saying, even if he's sincere, that doesn't really change anything. Paradox has been apologizing so much in recent years. Where does it really go? Is this going to be a success, or is All Under Heaven going to be a train wreck? And there I want to kind of talk about two things, I guess. I like this apology in the sense that I think it is sincere and I think QA is learning. But bugs weren't the only issue with this DLC. He himself actually addresses this as well. He says that there maybe should be some rethinking of the content strategy, of even doing event packs, of, you know, creating these tiny bite-sized updates, whether that makes any sense whatsoever. And that for me kind of hits the nail on the head. There isn't just a bug issue, there is a design issue. When I look at the content coming for Crusader Kings 3, I primarily see game mechanics that I can engage with because they are mechanics, not because they intuitively feel real to my character. So design-wise, these issues run a lot deeper. The QA manager apologizing is great, especially if a DLC releases in a bad, buggy state. But the design of this feature isn't great, but it's here to stay. Not to mention, of course, that, yeah, All Under Heaven is taking up all their resources, and it is making so that fewer resources can be allocated to smaller pieces of content, but nobody forced you to do All Under Heaven. You chose that yourself. We could have gotten a different DLC. My personal opinions, yes, I want trade, I want the Holy Roman Empire, I want so many religious mechanics, but all of them aside, this year's content could have simply been structured differently. You made these choices. So it's hardly on me, it's hardly on the community that doesn't work out. This is not really something that is going to get me to be understanding. It's not like we forced doing all of East Asia in one go on you. And this directly kind of, I suppose, brings me to the very last element of this discussion. And that is something that they addressed actually as well in the thread of the apology. That is the topic of something like the custodian team in Stellaris. If you are not aware, in Stellaris, after a time of the game being released, they essentially said, hey, we need a dedicated set of developers that just looks backwards and says, these things are unbalanced, these things are buggy, maybe we need to rework this or that mechanic, and then we can fix it. This was seen with absolute glee amongst the player base, because it meant that content that was already there wasn't just going to sit there and feel bad, seeing how the developers got better developing content and making better content in newer DLCs. This custodian initiative, I think, is something that most teams are doing to a certain degree. Ck3 also has this. It is called Realm Maintenance, and that's cool and that's neat, but I'll be honest with you, if All Under Heaven comes out and it is the most well-balanced experience ever created, the least buggy experience in all of Ck3, well, then it's going to make the other parts of CK3 look really humiliated. Right now, CK3 as it is, with all the old content that sits there, has the same issues of Coronations, which is why it riled me up so much. Look at Coronations. There are bugs, and there will be bugs going forward. This is sadly the case. Look at the design. They have made better activities. They have made better historical mechanics that kind of flow into the way that you treat the game. And then there are the ones that didn't do that. Royal Court, for example. I mean, yeah, that DLC came out half an eternity ago, the way that it feels at the very least. But the Royal Court could be a grand activity. It could be like tournaments, for example, but it isn't. It's 3 events. And it hasn't been reworked because it is a thing of the past. If China now gets examinations, if China gets way more content, for example, it will just make the Royal Court look even more embarrassing. I think what riled me up personally over the Coronations DLC and what got the community so riled up, we're pretty aligned there. When I look at Coronations, I see what happens to the entire rest of the game after content is released. It's true that indeed the Realm Maintenance Initiative exists. They are looking towards previous content. They are, now at this point, adding more throne rooms. They are trying to make sure that they are reworking old content, and they are doing this. But the frequency at which they are doing it is so low that, yeah, I mean, I look at Royal Court right now. A DLC that came out half an eternity ago, that is true, but is now just living in the shadow of grand activities and even the tournament screen. It feels like nothing. You click Hold Court, you get 3 events, and that is it. The court language is a forgotten feature. Religion hasn't been revisited in who knows how long, effectively ever since, of course, the creation of the game. It hasn't really been changed since 1.0. Simultaneously, when we're looking at, for example, the struggles, there are so many issues with the individual struggles that Paradox knows about, but they haven't been addressed either. When I look at the balancing, when I look at certain bugs, when I look at rewards that you get from tournaments that still can catapult you into just being a star after just a single event right there, when I look at things like secret faiths that are technically in the game, but in such a ham-fisted and janky fashion that they barely are in the game, I don't know what to say. Coronations right now makes me sad, because that content, all things considered, is probably not going to be addressed. What upsets me about it from a historical point of view, what makes it as a mechanic quite bad, it's going to be hard without more resources to really change things there. Now we could say, well, yeah, but they are working on all of East Asia. It's a lot of content and a lot of work, and that is true, but again, I didn't force them to do this. I would have been happier if they had a smaller expansion and then could have, you know, propped up what is already in the game. So made sure that the holding court activity is better, working on all these individual mechanics, making the economy more interesting, making sure that these things aren't incredibly unbalanced, which they are and have been for years. So, well, the excuse, it's kind of like, you did this yourself. If you wear pants that are too big for you and you don't have a belt, am I at fault for them dropping down? I don't think so. So, in hindsight, this apology and the immediate reaction by Paradox is good, but these issues now have accompanied the game for years, and it feels like they are going to accompany the game for more years to come, which feels incredibly defeating. I want to have fun in this game, and I have fun in this game, but I wish I could have so much more fun in it. So for me personally, I think this apology is great. I think the immediate bug fixes are great. But there is a much deeper underlying issue that is plaguing CK3 and has plagued it for years now. Fingers crossed, All Under Heaven is great, because if it isn't, it's going to be just another construction site that will take years to clean up. And I'm really not looking forward to that. Folks, let me know whether you agree with me, whether you disagree, whether you are upset or happy with Coronations. I mean, there are 17% of people that are. Let me know in the comments. I will keep you updated on what is happening with CK3 on this channel right here in news formats like this one. And I'll see you later, Alligator.